So, welcome to the second question and answer session we're doing on mindfulness. And today, I, being Gerard, am joined by John Wild. Hi, John.
Hi, mate.
And we've got a few questions for people, mainly kind of based around people who are wondering about mindfulness but don't really know whether to get into it or not, and whether it's for them. So, I suppose a good place to start would be Jane down the road in Hastings, who's saying, I'm thinking about getting into mindfulness. What do I need? Which I would take to mean, what kind of equipment, perhaps, what time. So if we could go into a general thing about, what someone might need to have in order to get into that.
Yeah, it's a good question. One I get asked quite a lot, and the simple answer is not very much. You don't need very much. If we're talking about equipment, possibly nothing at all. There's no special gear to buy with mindfulness in terms of, I know if you go to yoga, there's all kinds of yoga pants and yoga tops you can buy. With mindfulness, sort of comfortable loose clothing pretty much covers it. In terms of equipment, there are various things you can meditate on. You can meditate on a special meditation bench, stroke stool, easily available online. They come often with comfortable cushions to, just add that extra little bit of comfort. But they're not essential. You don't need to meditate on a bench. Some people are more comfortable meditating on a bench. A chair is basically what you need. Most homes have them. Most meditation centres that you go to will have a chair on which to meditate. Some people, some people are more physically flexible than others. So you can meditate on the floor, supported by various cushions. That's certainly something to look into. But if your concern is, I've signed up to an 8-week course and I'm wondering what I need to bring, the simple answer to that is probably nothing. Everything should be supplied unless you're told in advance to bring anything special. It's kind of unlikely.
Certainly, anybody who signs up for our courses, just bring yourself.
Just bring yourself.
Yeah.
And it really is that simple. I'm just trying to think if I've missed anything out there. I think you meditate on a stool, a bench, you can meditate on cushions. As part of the 8-week course, in fact, quite a major element of the 8-week course is the body scan meditation, which is done on the floor. And again, most meditation centres, ours included, would have very comfortable mats to lie on. So you're not just sort of lying on the floor collecting dust. You've got something that sort of supports you, gives you that added bit of comfort and support. And so it's very, very simple. It's one of those things. Basically, if you've got a chair to sit on, you're up and away. That's really it. Nothing more complicated than that.
Something that various people have asked me, given that we offer courses via Skype for people who are not local, is how does that work? So I presume, in terms of what people need for courses, you would need Skype for a Skype course.
Yes.
But how would that work apart from that? If you're talking to someone on the phone, would there be any differences? Do you think?
No, Skype courses work pretty much the same. I'd work on a one-to-one basis, in person, face to face, in a pretty much identical way that I'd work with somebody on Skype in a one-to-one fashion. There'd be ample rooms for them to ask me questions. The one-to-one courses are rather more bespoke by their very nature. They tend to adapt themselves to the current moment-by-moment needs of the person who I'm teaching. And what I mean by that is there's more room on a one-to-one course for people to bring up perhaps what's an issue for them at the moment, which we can bring mindfulness to. So they're a lot more specific in that sense. They're a lot more personalised, and they'd work pretty much the same way on Skype as they would in person. Similarly, you know, if you come to me for a one-to-one course, there will be time during the allotted time where you're invited to meditate, whether that's a sitting meditation or a body scan, which would entail lying down. So you'd be invited in the same way if we were talking via Skype, that you'd be told, you know, for the next 15 minutes, and you'd be invited to make yourself comfortable. So pretty much the same thing. It's there are very few differences.
Possibly worth pointing out that when we talk about doing these meditations during the 8-week course, they are guided meditations. It's not just sitting there in silence.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Something else that occurred to me while you were saying that about doing the body scan is that people might not understand what a body scan is, so would it be possible to take them through that a bit?
Yeah, the body scan, which is something that on my courses I introduce in the first week. They're conducted lying down normally, although it is possible to do them sitting up, and certainly if somebody is uncomfortable lying down, then we would look into alternatives, and normally sitting up would be the option there. They can either be done standing up, but the normal thing is that you lay down, and basically I as a teacher will direct your attention to your body area by area by area. And so what would normally happen is that after settling you in and making sure you're comfortable in your posture, you would be invited to bring your attention first of all to the left foot and the big toe on the left foot, for example. So, and you'd be simply invited to bring your attention to that area and simply to notice any sensations that are felt in that area. So that might be a sort of warmth or coolness or dryness, moistness, itchiness. And what we do is I'd normally start with the big toe of the left foot, and then gradually work my way up the body. So we go from the left foot up the lower left leg to the knee, the thigh, and so on and so forth. So we kind of cover the whole body right up to the head, and the idea is that we are simply inviting your attention to be directed towards that part of the body that is currently under the microscope, as it were, at that particular point in the meditation.
What's the aim of this?
Well, the aim, I think it's fair to say, like every other part of the course, is to bring awareness, is to bring awareness in the present moment experience to whatever the meditation is. So when we're asking somebody to bring their attention to the big toe of the left foot, quite often people react with, well, why would I want to do that? What's interesting about the big toe of the left foot? It's simply about awareness. It's simply about it's building up a sense of body awareness, because mindfulness, let us not forget, is as much about the body as a whole as it is about the mind. And it's one of the common conceptions that mindfulness is about thoughts. It's all about stopping thoughts. That's one preconception that's simply not true. Mindfulness isn't about stopping anything in that sense. So the body scan is almost a kind of a forensic sort of meditation on the entire body, bringing your attention to parts of the body that perhaps most of us hardly ever think about. We hardly ever bring our attention or our awareness to, let's say, the back of the knee or the sides of the knee or the elbows. We tend to take these body parts for granted. And so the body scan is really devised to very simply bring our attention right there, right into the heart of it, and very simply to notice what's going on there in that part of the body.
And how does that benefit people in the long term, or over the course of the course, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it benefits people in the same way, or a very similar way to, the sit-in meditation, where perhaps, they're asked to bring their attention to their breathing. This is all about, if you like, sharpening awareness and developing the muscle of attention, so that we're becoming, to be present. If you were to say to me, well, what is mindfulness? The line I normally trot out is that mindfulness is about being more present in our own lives, and to be present in our own lives, we simply have to notice. We have to simply notice what's going on for us right now, in this moment. And so, while that applies to thoughts, to our thinking that's going on, in the sense of I'm walking down the street, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, there's people on the beach, but I'm not seeing any of this because my mind is completely immersed in whatever Joe said to me at the party last night, or the confrontation that I'm expecting to have with my boss the following morning over that missing petty cash from the register, or any number of things. So just as mindfulness is about noticing what's going on in our minds, it's equally about noticing what's going on in our bodies. In fact, what we learn in mindfulness is that the two are pretty much inseparable, and they're part of a kind of closed circuit, if you like, that the body is constantly informing the mind is constantly informing and affecting the body. So
Absolutely.
by bringing our attention, by shining a light, if you like, on those areas of the body, we're simply bringing our awareness to those parts of the body.
That sort of leads nicely onto a question from Natalie in London. And although the question comes from Natalie, this is quite a regular and common question, I would say, which is simply how long before it makes a difference. I think specifically in order to keep some kind of specifics here, we should say the 8-week course. How long before that makes a difference, perhaps?
Yeah, well, this is. I mean, my answer to this is fairly predictable, in that it depends absolutely on the individual. I don't mind talking occasionally about my own personal experience. I pretty much took to mindfulness like a duck to water. The first time I meditated, because initially I started learning meditation from a book, and that book was Finding Peace in a Frantic World by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. And I was about 3 weeks into that book. It's an 8-week course book. I was about 3 weeks into the course as taught by that book when it suddenly occurred to me that I might find a local teacher in Brighton, where I was living at the time. So I started meditating before I meditated under a teacher, and my connection with it and my enthusiasm for it was born pretty much instantly. When I meditated for the first time, I had a very, very strong sense of coming home to something that I'd always longed for. That's kind of how I look at meditation. And not everybody's like that. We all have, well, we all bring a different kind of sensibility to it. I mean, at the time, my life was falling apart in many ways, and there was a sense about me that perhaps I had nothing to lose. A friend had mentioned mindfulness to me, and I thought, well, I need to try something, because the life that I'm living is unsustainable. So I came to it with not a little cynicism. I mean, there was quite a lot of cynicism involved. I mean, and maybe that's down to coming from the punk generation, as I did, where the idea of meditating was more of a kind of regarded as more of a kind of late 60s hippie thing. So there's a certain amount of resistance, but there was also, I think, a certain amount of open-heartedness that I thought, well, I'm happy to try this. And for me, the effect was almost immediate. I meet many people who struggled initially a little bit with meditation. They felt it was something that was a bit of a chore, and then perhaps they grow to love it. They learn to, as I like to say, fold it into their lives. So in terms of the 8-week course, as with anything, there's a percentage of people who start a course and then drop out. That sometimes happens for all kinds of reasons, and not necessarily connected with whether they take to meditation or not. Sometimes people find that committing to a course is perhaps they've overstretched themselves in terms of the time they've got, and their family commitments, any number of things. So there's a certain small percentage of people who don't make it through to the end. I think the people who go through the whole 8 weeks of a mindfulness course, I think it's fair to say, and I learned this through the inquiry from the talking that I do, whether in a group or whether in a one-to-one situation, that people's feelings about how the course is going, how they're taking to meditation, how they're managing to find time to meditate, and how it's affecting their lives, changes from week to week. There's quite over the 8-week course. There's quite there can be, not always, but there can be a really dramatic shift from week to week in terms of what people are discovering about themselves and about their relationship with thoughts, their relationship to their own bodies, the way they relate to their partners, their children, to the world in general, to nature. So it's quite often it's almost a case that from week to week that the lens widens and widens and widens, and I get a sense from people, and it's always incredibly heartwarming to hear how people are opening up to all kinds of truths about themselves, quite often revelations about themselves in terms of how they relate to themselves and the world outside.
I found that. I found stuff coming out of my mouth and I didn't even know where it was coming from almost. It was absolutely a profound experience. I was just thinking that how long before it makes a difference is the bit there. I wouldn't home in on how long, but the bit I would home in on is what does making a difference mean? Because the minute I discovered the mindfulness course, that made a difference in my head immediately. It didn't mean my life suddenly changed from black to white or anything like that, but I got this firstly I got this buzz off the fact I was actually doing something about stuff I wanted to change, about improvements I wanted to have in the way I felt. And so the minute I'd sort of started, which was a bit out of my comfort zone, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people, but the fact that I'd kind of committed to doing that was in itself making a difference, really. And then everything after that, it was just more like a sort of snowball effect, I suppose. But for me, how long before it makes a difference? 5 seconds perhaps, really, in my personal experience. But also I think maybe it's worth pointing out that there is no sort of blinding flash, where somebody's waved a wand and all of a sudden you're wearing different clothes and living on a different continent and, with a different personality. It's a kind of...
No, it's much more subtle than that.
And, it's a very gentle process, I think.
Yeah, and I think what I hear a lot is that normally mindfulness isn't the first thing that people have tried to combat, anxiety, depression, or even that sort of vague rumbling under the floorboards that's telling them that something is wrong with their lives and that they can't quite figure out why. Or people who are at some kind of crossroads or whatever has drawn them to mindfulness in the first place. They've normally tried one or two things. Quite a lot of self-help things are quite often mentioned. And I think what quickly becomes apparent to most people is that mindfulness is very different. It's not self-help at all. It's not self-help as we know it. I mean, I think of self-help as something that normally perhaps you learn through a book that promises that if you do X, Y and Z, then you will achieve A, B, and C in a certain amount of weeks. The problem with a lot of self-help is that it doesn't really stick. People, I mean, you know, and I've seen people with great heaving bookshelves full of self-help books. I'm not going to make generalizations about those books, but I will say that the difference that people notice with a mindfulness course with a teacher is they feel engaged by it. They feel engaged and they feel quite inspired. You know, and they've got the challenge of home practice and the thought of coming back next week and discussing how that went, and having someone in front of them that they can ask questions of, and you know, the very nature of an 8-week course is that it's a very gentle, incremental, slow incremental kind of progress, if you like, whereby I don't think anyone ever feels. No one's ever given me the impression that they've felt as though they've been thrown in at the deep end.
No,
you know, we don't start with sort of, you know, 45-minute meditations, and I think all along the 8-week courses, I think, been brilliantly calibrated and fine-tuned over the years since, I guess, it sort of first came into existence in the late 70s, early 80s. It's gone through a few permutations. It's now fairly established, and you know, there's always going to be differences from teacher to teacher, because teachers bring a different flavour to it. But I think the main thing is that it's something that if you're engaged by it, you're likely to be really engaged by it. It's something that, because here's a beautiful thing. I'm not going to give away how a mindfulness course starts, because there's an element of surprise about that, but suffice to say that you're handed something very everyday, and you're invited to spend a few minutes engaging with it, and it's a wonderful start to the course. And the reason why I think it's such a wonderful start to a course is because that particular exercise, as the weeks go by, you start to realize that if you can be mindful about that one thing that's introduced at the start of a course, you can be mindful about pretty much anything in your life.
Yeah, it's like a bedrock. Bedrock, yeah.
Because this is very simple stuff. This is one thing I can't emphasize enough, which is there's nothing baffling about the concepts, the ideas, the notions that underpin mindfulness.
Anyone, children could understand it. Young children,
a really small child could understand.
Yeah.
You know, for example, bringing your attention to the breath and noticing that you're breathing as you're sitting, and then if your mind wanders, simply noticing that, and then returning your attention gently and non-judgmentally to your breath. I mean, that could be explained to a 5-year-old and they get it.
That's a perfect time to ask you a question that could have been made for this second, really. And this is from Rita in Spain, who's saying, I keep getting distracted during meditation. What am I doing wrong?
Well, Rita, thank you for your question. You're not doing anything wrong. This is mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice is noticing that you're being distracted. If you're noticing that you're being distracted, you're being mindful. Here's the thing: mindfulness is not promising miracles, but mindfulness is not promising anything that's not actually very easy to grasp. And what I mean by that is that it's not saying that mindfulness isn't saying that it can do away with distractions. Life is endlessly distracting. Mindfulness is simply saying, can we be aware in that moment that we're being distracted? Can we bring our attention gently back to the here and now, to this present moment experience, which is, let's be absolutely clear about it, the only moment that we've got. This is it's always now. You know, and someone might say, well, yesterday was yesterday, but yesterday was also now when it was now. You know, tomorrow is, you know, the future is unwritten. We don't know what's going to come tomorrow. We may have ideas about the future, but we only ever have now. And so what I'd say to Rita is keep noticing that you're being distracted, you know.
I wonder if distraction's almost an unhelpful word, you know, because it is how your brain works. Your brain has thoughts. Your brain constantly has thoughts in its kind of default state. Well, certainly in modern life in its default state. Perhaps hundreds of years ago things were a bit more healthy and less stressful. But so distraction sort of it is almost a judgmental word in a funny kind of way. You know what I mean? No one's doing anything wrong. It is just, yeah, like you say, gently bringing yourself back, never chiding yourself for the way that your brain works anyway. I'm just trying to, put a bit of space in between those thoughts, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because in a way, certainly in terms of our thoughts, and distractions can be more than thoughts. They can be sounds, they can be smells. But if we're talking here about how we're distracted by our own thoughts, yes, that is how excuse me, that is how the mind naturally works in a way that we're kind of constantly being pulled in this direction, in that direction. Now most of us carry around these things called smartphones that on the positive side link us to the world and in lots and lots of wonderful, inspiring ways, and on the other hand have become something that's so convenient that many of us struggle to leave these things alone. So you get that sort of awfully sad sight when you walk past a restaurant where you see a couple there and their food's been served and they're both staring at smartphone screens and they're not saying a word, and there's something very, very, very sad about that. And so you might say, well, what's the mindful thing to do if you notice that you're sitting in a nice restaurant with a plate of wonderful food in front of you and you find yourself staring at a screen, checking on your emails, scrolling through your Facebook feed, checking out what news The Guardian is delivering at that particular moment. All these things that most of us kind of do habitually. The mindful thing is not to sort of feel guilt and shame, and the mindful thing is simply to notice. And
without judgment.
Without judgment. I mean, without judging yourself, but also without judging. These things are like a modern day addiction. Your smartphones, your tablets, and they become so convenient in our lives that to many of us they feel like sort of extensions of our own body. Some people actually feel genuinely bereft if they're separated from their phone for long periods, or if they run out of juice halfway through a train journey. So and it's very easy to judge others, and it's very easy to judge ourselves, and it's the simple thing to do there is simply to notice that you're out of the moment. You're staring at a screen and you've not got any particular interest in what that screen is showing you. So the mindful thing to do would be simply to turn it off, put it away, and actually enjoy the meal. To actually notice what you're eating and how it smells and how it's served and what it tastes like.
But also, I think perhaps to realise that those things are or have become almost natural reactions. When my phone battery went dead the other week when I was up at Stansted Airport, I for all the mindfulness I've studied, I still had that kind of knee-jerk reaction of of not being best pleased with the situation. So I suppose what I'm saying about not judging anything, these things won't necessarily stop happening, or at various intervals, though they should get less. But when they do, it is just a question of bringing yourself back to the moment. It's you can't avoid things happening. But you can control how you react to them.
Yeah, I mean that if we're talking about thoughts, that's what the mind does. Again, that minds wander. That's what minds do. That's particularly what the modern mind does. And so mindfulness isn't saying that's a terrible thing, we need to put a stop to this. It's accepting that that's what the mind does. With practice, and this is in a way going back to the question earlier about how long is it going to take to actually work. Hopefully throughout an 8-week course, a person would notice the difference they might find that they're responding more in situations rather than reacting, for example. They might start finding a little bit of space around thoughts and feelings and situations, so if they feel possibly less overwhelmed.
Yeah, less panicky.
Less panicky.
Yeah.
Maybe they might find, around about the middle of the course, where it might dawn on them that they seem to be travelling lighter. That the burdens in their life that they were carrying, the burdens of the past, and the weight of the future, and what that holds. They might be travelling, all these things. And so I think it's really a case of there's no two ways around this. Meditation is central to the practice. It's a meditation-based practice, and certainly in my experience, committing to that practice and actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
This is not a word that's often used.
No, and we probably sound a bit overly serious
Yes.
talking about it right now, because it is, I suppose, it's the formality of having a microphone on. But I know we normally don't talk about it.
No.
With this tone of voice, so to speak, do we? So
no, that's right. That's right. It's something that I look forward to doing on a daily basis, and
yeah, me too. Me too. It's a treat.
Yes, it's a
for
treat.
me.
It's a treat. I mean, to be able to this is real me time. This is, and that might sound really kind of selfish, but the fact is that after a meditation, we're generally speaking, I do feel more settled, and my mind does feel stiller, and I do feel more responsive and less reactive to life. It doesn't just benefit me, because even if the day throws up challenges, and let's face it, most days throw up challenges for all of us, small, big, medium, is that it actually makes the world a better place. If I'm nicer to people and I'm calmer and I'm less reactive, then it's not just good for me, it's good for... So enjoyment is, I think there's quite often, meditation is sold in a particular way to people. It's, the normal image of a meditator is a beautiful woman or a sort of well-toned man sitting. There's normally a sunset involved, and they're on some kind of
on a rock.
on a rock, and that's kind of there's nothing wrong with that, because there's people out there who will be having that meditative experience. For most of us, it's perhaps a little bit more mundane than that, but the mundanity of it, might involve sitting on a chair in your kitchen and meditating. But in a sense, meditation is meditation, whether you're sitting on some beautiful beach in Goa, with the sun behind you, and and whatever else that kind of package involves. To me, I don't need to be meditating on a beach in Goa. I can have a perfectly wonderful meditation.
Yeah, a bus stop in Lewisham in the
At a bus stop at Lewisham. I've had some wonderful, particularly late night, when you look up at the bus sign, you're hoping for a bus to arrive in 2 minutes, and it says 55 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's a good illustration, I think, of a good a point to raise, because you can do a number of things then if you're sitting at a bus stop. Whether you've had a lovely night or a not so lovely night, the last thing you want to hear is that your next bus is going to take 55 minutes and there's no one around to chat with or whatever. You could
so then you're projecting to the future, aren't you?
Yes.
Instead of thinking, okay, I've got this time right now,
yes,
and that gives me a bit of space to enjoy the now for the next 55 minutes.
To enjoy the now. So to enjoy the now. So rather, you could sit there for 55 minutes and gnash your teeth and bemoan the state of public transport in London or wherever, or even turn it back on yourself and say, why is it always me?
Why didn't I leave 5 minutes
Why
earlier?
didn't I leave 5 minutes earlier? Why do I always miss that bus? And any number of things. But you could actually sit there and You don't even need to arrange yourself in a meditation posture and shut your eyes and meditate. You can simply be awake to the moment. You can notice the play of light from you can notice the traffic. You can notice the rain on window screens. Any number of things. There's a whole world out there that's worth being interested in.
And there's a whole world inside. Returning to the breath, I think, is really useful in those situations as well. So I think as the 8-week course goes on, as your meditative experience goes on, generally, I find anyway that I find myself returning to the breath regularly, and it builds a sort of symbolic neural association, perhaps, with when I'm sort of meditating in more sort of silent or easy places and times.
Yeah.
My brain immediately goes back to that when I go back to the breath. So I see why people call it an anchor in that respect.
Yeah, and going back to sort of habits earlier, as much as anything, mindfulness is an undoing of our habits. As much as it's learning new tricks, new skills is a better word, new skills, it's also about unlearning habits that are sort of deeply embedded in us. Those grooves have been well worn. Our negative spirals of thought and our kind of our compulsion to think about certain negative things in our lives and to ruminate about the past and try and fix the past, which is an impossibility, or to somehow control the future, which is an equally absurd notion. What mindfulness is really teaching us is to simply be. And simply being can become a habit. With practice, it can become a habit. So, you do start. Whether you're sitting on a beautiful beach in Goa, or sitting at that rainy, windswept bus stop in Lewisham, it's equally possible in both instances to simply be with that moment. To simply notice what's around you, and there might be people out there thinking, well, I'd much prefer the beach in Goa than the rain-swept bus stop in Lewisham. But if you're at the bus stop in Lewisham, make the best of the bus stop in Lewisham.
Yeah, don't just wish for the beach in Goa.
If you spend those 55 minutes bemoaning the state of public transport and thinking about wishing that you were. As soon as you start wishing that you're in Goa rather than in Lewisham, you're wishing your moment away. Why would you want to wish your life away? Not that it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing to occasionally have thoughts about what a nice holiday Goa would make, or San Francisco, or if you fancy a holiday in San Francisco, save up your money and go to San Francisco, but don't spend all your time wishing that you're in San Francisco when you're somewhere else.
And don't spend the next 6 months of saving your money waiting for that moment to make everything all right, because everything can be all right now, and San Francisco can be a bonus.
Yeah, but and good luck with getting San Francisco perfect as well, because you might just end up in San Francisco missing your dog, missing your home, missing your mates,
missing the bus.
Well, they do have buses in San Francisco, so you could equally find yourself at a bus stop in San Francisco, thinking, well, this is even more of a grind than waiting for a bus in Lewisham.
That was only 55 minutes.
So in a way, it's kind of easier to simply be in the moment wherever you are.
Being in the moment leads us on to Dave from Ireland, who asks, how does paying attention to brushing my teeth help? For people who don't know, there is a sort of element of this that can come up in the 8-week course of brushing your teeth being one of those moments you can donate to sort of being mindful and mindful practice. And I do that. I try to do that, and on a regular basis. So can you take us through what brushing your teeth has got to do with mindfulness?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be about brushing your teeth, but I think from week one of the home tasks, the home practice tasks that you're set is choose an everyday activity for the week, just one for the week, and each day bring mindfulness to it, be attentive to it, show it, be aware of what you're doing while you're doing it, And brushing your teeth is an obvious example of that. It's something that most of us do at least twice a day. Normally, obviously morning and evening, just before bed. And what you're invited to do by being mindful while you're brushing your teeth is simply to notice what's happening when you're brushing your teeth. So how the toothpaste looks, how that feels when it goes onto your brush and then into your mouth. Just noticing the movements of the brush. And I can imagine some people out there thinking, well, as the question suggests, why would I want to be doing this? And it does go back to this idea that if you can be mindful about brushing your teeth, then it follows that you can be mindful about anything. Again, it's just kind of exercising that muscle of attention, whereby we're noticing, because you might notice, if you're being mindful, you might just notice that while you're brushing your teeth, you're thinking about a million different things. Some of them might be very stressful. You might be thinking about that meeting at work. You might be worried about missing the meeting because that bus might not turn up in time, and so on and so forth. So it's very deliberately when we invite people to choose an activity, and we mention things like showering and brushing the teeth, because they don't take awfully long.
But they are normally things you do on autopilot,
yes.
And therefore you just spend the whole time thinking about the past or the future as opposed to the present, I think.
Yeah, and it brings me once again to my favourite statistic, which is how many thoughts does the average person have per day. And I asked this of somebody quite recently. I said, how many thoughts do you have a day, do you reckon? And he thought about it and he said, I reckon between 12 and 20, which is quite a guess. And I said, well, the correct, and I say correct in inverted commas, the answer is apparently, I'm very careful to not state this as an absolute, because of course it will vary from person to person. The correct answer apparently is 76,543. And this guy said to me, no, that can't be right. So I wasn't saying to him, you're wrong. I mean, he insisted that he does have around about 12 to 20 thoughts a day. But I said, if you really notice what you're doing, say for example when you're brushing your teeth, I think you'll probably find that you have at least 12 to 20 thoughts while you're brushing your teeth. Even if those thoughts are as mundane as, I'm fed up with Colgate, I need to switch to something less spearminty, if that's a word, or I need new toothpaste, or I'm running out of shaving cream, or shall I get my hair cut? They're all thoughts. And so again it comes back to this idea of if we get into the habit of just noticing what we're doing, of being in the moment while we're brushing our teeth, maybe, just maybe, we can also be mindful when we're having that row with the girlfriend or the boyfriend, or when the boss has given us a grilling, or when we're facing really difficult decisions in our lives, and we need some space in which to respond.
I think it also helps with brushing your teeth.
Yes. Of course it does.
I find myself, since I've been applying mindfulness to brushing your teeth, I actually brush my teeth better. I take better care of my toothbrush. I leave the bathroom in a state that my wife is more pleased with than I used to, and the way I would sort of apply to all that is if you can sort of develop your concentration in that respect, to be distracted less, that makes you amazingly more kind of productive in a work situation or in a creative situation and all that as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think, it starts with brushing your teeth, but the skills you're building are transferable.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you use the word creative, and I think it's probably a good moment to mention that mindfulness can be used for creativity, to enhance creativity, to sharpen one's creative abilities or instincts. And the thinking behind that is that if we're present in our own lives, we're going to be less distracted. So, before I became a mindfulness teacher, I was gainfully or otherwise employed as a journalist. So I'd always be working to deadline, and very typically for a freelance journalist, I mean, the amount of prevarication I went through before I actually settled down to write the piece. I'd sharpen pencils. I'd do the hoovering. It's the only time the
amount of
hoovering.
other stuff that gets
Yeah,
done.
I'd clean the windows. It's like just putting off that moment. And even during the writing of it, just finding myself really distracted by stuff. So the phone might ring when I'm just as I'm starting to get going, just as I've started to break the back of this article I've got to write, the phone goes and I'm kind of relieved, and I might spend 45 minutes chatting away to a friend, and then finding it really hard to get back to the piece, So being mindful about it, I can. These days, I might just pick up the phone and say to my friend, "Listen, I can't talk right now. I'm busy with writing. I'll call you when I'm done." And that gives me an incentive to actually get it done. So I personally find I find writing so much easier now. The right way, I still to some extent earn a living as a writer as of now, 2016, and I find the whole process so much easier because my mind is where it needs to be.
On that, almost on that subject, perhaps this is a bit of a stretch to tie in. Jack from somewhere, I can't actually read where Jack's from, but he's from somewhere, obviously. And he asks, is it helpful to meditate to music as opposed to the silence between talking? I suppose you get on guided meditations.
It's a great question. I wouldn't say it's a controversial subject in meditation circles, mindfulness circles, but I've talked to a few teachers about this, and I've always been a bit curious as to why music is not included on an 8-week course. We're not invited to meditate to music, and because I do occasionally meditate to music, and I've spent probably longer than I should have kind of compiling an iPod full of music that I like to meditate to. The answer I got from teachers is that music is too subjective a thing to roll out on a course where you might have 10 to 12 people that you're teaching. And clearly what they mean by that is that one man's meat is another man's poison, that for one person they might like sort of sitars and Buddha bar beats, and another person might prefer the music of Brian Eno, for example. Brian Eno's ambient music for airports, for example, to meditate to, where the kind of music where there's very few surprises. It almost kind of just gently ebbs along, almost like a gentle sort of country stream.
But is it not just a distraction?
Now here's the thing, right? So I think this is what we need to make really clear here, which is there's a very big difference between meditating to music and listening to music. Okay, I've got this big thing about music, which I think is worth raising here, which is that maybe I'm alone here, but I suspect I'm not. When I was 16 years old and really becoming very passionate about music, this was 1976, 77, obviously the punk era, I would spend an inordinate amount of time sitting on my bed doing nothing but listening to music. I mean, I wasn't thinking about school, I wasn't thinking about the girl I fancy in 4C, I wasn't thinking about television, I wasn't thinking about the row I just had with my parents. I was listening to music. Now, I suspect many other teenagers who live in similar lives. You get a new album, you save up your pocket money, you go out, you've got the first Clash album, and you listen to it, and you listen to it, and you listen to it, until it's worn out. And there's something really beautiful about that, about engaging with music in such a kind of concentrated, focused way.
Is that meditating?
No, that's listening to music. This is what I'm going to come to. I mean, basically, we lose that. Most of us lose that. When's the last time that anyone actually sat down, whether it was lying on a bed or sitting on a sofa, and listened to a whole album from start to finish? You know, these days, certainly my experience of being around other people is that people tend to, as they grow up and gain responsibilities and life becomes complicated, music sort of becomes a backdrop to their lives rather than something that's more at the forefront. What's the difference then between meditating to music and listening to music?
Or even between meditating to music and meditating without music?
Okay, right. Well, we often use a lot of anchors. We talk about anchors in meditation. The breath is the most obvious anchor.
Yeah.
It's something that's always with us, and certainly until we expire and take our last breath. The breath is always there. It's very easily accessible, and that's presumably why it's chosen as more often than not as the anchor. So when we're doing a breath meditation, we're noticing the breath. So we're taking natural breaths. We're not forcing the breath in any way, and we are simply noticing the in breath and the out breath. And then after a few seconds or a few minutes of that, we might notice that our minds have wandered off to that shopping list, or that holiday we're going to take next month, or the pay rise we need to negotiate with the boss. And so we notice that our minds have wandered, and we come back to the breath. Now, my argument would be that there's no reason why we shouldn't use music in a very similar way. I mean, admittedly, there are forms of music that would be fairly challenging to meditate to. I'm not suggesting that people get hold of Motorhead's Greatest Hits and try to meditate to that. It's very loud, very fast, pulsating. I'm not saying impossible, but I think it'd be quite difficult to meditate. It's quite challenging to meditate to that. If you choose something that you're kind of has got less surprises, perhaps music that kind of moves along at a kind of more or less even keel, I don't see why you can't meditate to that. And what I mean by meditate to that is, well, okay, to answer your question from earlier, to experience that music in a similar way to how I experienced music when I was lying on my bed at 16. So in a sense, okay, here's the difference. I can play the same piece of music and experience it in two very different ways. I can put on, let's say, Roxy Music's first album, one of my favourites, right? Now, I could sit and listen to that, and it would spark off so many memories for me. I probably first heard it in 1975, so it would bring memories of the schoolmates that I listened to it with, the girl I might have dated briefly or wanted to date, didn't quite work out, or the heartbreak that resulted from that.
In every dream home.
Exactly. Yes, well done. So, in other words, I'm listening to the music, but the music really is just a trigger for all my memories and feelings about those memories.
Yeah.
Okay. But when I'm meditating, I'm listening to the music almost as though I don't know what music is. I'm listening to it for the pure sensation of sound. So I'm not even calling it music.
Okay.
All right? And I'm listening to the sounds, and I'm listening to the spaces between sounds. And if I notice that my mind has wandered, I notice that, and non-judgmentally and very gently return to the sound, just the raw sensation of sound. So whether it's, Brian Eno's keyboard, or a piano line composed by Eric Satie, or whatever it is, I'm coming back to that sound, and I'm being with that sound. So I'm not sitting there going, Brian Eno, right, now he was the chap, he's that funny looking chap in Roxy Music.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I suppose I don't get experientially from my own sort of thing. the 8-week course has stuff about sound, about acceptance of sound, and hearing something that you might otherwise get irritated by, like I don't know, like a sort of loud motorbike going past your house, or like some workmen constantly making a racket next door or whatever, and meditation, mindfulness, as I understand it, as I practice it, teaches you to sort of to accept those sounds, to listen to them as sounds without tying any stories to them, like those workmen are annoying me, or that motorbike's clearly a penis extension.
Yes.
That sort of stuff.
Yes.
So in accepting all that, I would just look at music as an attempt by me, if I put it on, to keep all that out in a way, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you're right about, there's, again, going back to this word invitation, which is quite often unavoidable, because this is all an invitation. Mindfulness is, in a sense, my people sometimes say to me, is it possible to be mindful 24/7? And I always say, well, it'd be pretty tough. That's an almost unachievable aim that you're setting yourself here. But it's maybe the way to think about it is that every moment is an invitation to be mindful. And so when we're meditating, yes, a motorbike might go past, and yes, that could trigger thoughts about noise pollution and other kinds of pollution, and why doesn't he put a silencer on it, and never like motorbikes, and never like people who ride motorbike. Yeah, any number of thoughts that can gather around the sound of a motorbike. And so what we're being invited to do during meditation is, if that motorbike suddenly appears, you hear the sound purely as sound. And so you if you can, resist the temptation to build any kind of narrative around it.
Or connect it to any emotion.
Yes.
Apart from the sense of hearing.
Yeah. Now, so anything that comes up, we're normally invited when we're doing a sound meditation, is we're bringing our attention. Sometimes what we do is we bring our attention to the sounds in the room. So there might be sort of, feet moving on the floor. There might be the sound of your own breathing, someone else's breathing, and then you might be invited to extend your awareness to sounds outside the room. So unless you're somewhere particularly quiet, there might be traffic, there might be pedestrians, and so. But all that stuff is obviously it's random, and it's not chosen by you. I suppose the difference is that if you choose to meditate to a piece of music, you're saying, this is what I'm going to meditate to. This is
what I'm going to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I make it kind of interesting for myself by. I've got around about 8 gigabytes worth of music on a little iPod, and I put it on shuffle, so I'm never sure what I'm going to get.
Oh, right, okay.
Right, so it's a bit of a kind of roulette wheel, but I kind of know that there are going to be no horrible surprises in there. It's not like it's not like I've turned on the radio and I don't know what they're going to play, what kind of music they're going to play next. Yeah. What I'm going to hear has been chosen, and so my point is, and I don't know whether this would be whether other mindfulness teachers would disagree with me about this, but it's something that, while I'm not at the stage yet as we speak of introducing this as a kind of regular item or element on the 8-week course, it's something I'm giving a lot of thought to. It's maybe something that I'll develop as a kind of separate idea away from the course. I think this thing of, if you're interested in learning about how to marry mindfulness, meditation and music, you come along here for a couple of hours on a Wednesday night, and we'll
absolutely
all those possibilities. Yeah.
I think sound, I love that phrase that I presume I heard from you, the symphony of life. Ever since I've heard that phrase, I just find everything so acceptable. That everything is yeah, everything is just a noise. You know, the motorbike noise will be gone in a second. That's pretty obvious. The workmen next door, they're almost certainly working to improve someone's life. I don't build these narratives, but I'm aware that there are various narratives you can sort of put on any noise whatsoever. You know, short of bombs going off or something like that. There's usually something positive, some kind of positive intention behind any noise that happens, no matter how difficult you might normally kind of find it. So
unless of course you're having a nice quiet pint in a pub, and someone puts Def Leppard on the jukebox.
Well, they're doing that for their own enjoyment.
No,
yeah, okay, I'm struggling with that.
That's where I draw. That's personally where I draw the line.
Yeah,
that's the point where I'd probably walk outside, and even if it was raining, I'd enjoy the rest of my pint in the peace and tranquility of the outside, the relative peace and tranquility, rather than be bombarded by a Def Leppard.
An invitation to fresh air. I think there's loads of stuff. Maybe we should go into just doing one of these questions and answer things about sound, because I find it absolutely fascinating. Solfeggio tones and binaural beats and alpha waves. I think there's a whole world of possibility out there that, whilst it might not strictly be mindfulness, I think it's kind of like trying to take us to the same good places that mindfulness is.
I think sounds are a really, extreme, I think is the word, a real extreme influence, I think, on our moods and our everyday demeanour. It's like, what the mind does, of course, and this is a mind thing, when the mind hears a sound, I think what it does is it says, either I like it or I don't. I like, as I'm walking past the window and I hear the sound of Sam Cooke singing one of his hits, I might stop and pause and go, Sam Cooke. You can't go wrong with Sam Cooke. Now, hearing Sam Cooke randomly coming out of somebody's window is it's going to improve my mood. There's no doubt about that. I'm gonna feel really blessed that I happen to be walking past the window when my favourite singer of all time was singing his heart out. I might feel differently about. I'm not a big fan. Let's go back to motorbikes. So whereas with Sam Cooke, I'll go, I like that sound, and I want it to continue. With a motorbike, I'm more inclined to say, I wish that sound would go away. Which is a bit kind of, it's not going to go away, it's going to last as long as it's going to last. I mean, if I'm walking down the street, I think I've got quite sensitive hearing. If I hear somebody from a distance drilling a road, that heavy, really loud, pulsating drilling sound, like a Test Department album or something, I see that coming, and so either I'll take a detour or I'll at the very least cross the road. But I don't want to go near it. But that's fine. That's a kind of instinctive thing. But I think we spend a lot of our time discriminating into, we slice things up into that which I like and that which I don't like, and some of that stuff we can skillfully. Some of the stuff we don't like we can skillfully avoid. Some of it is simply here and it's going to remain here.
In which case we can skillfully accept it.
Skillfully accept it, yes. Yeah. And that goes for noise, that goes for all kinds of sounds, that's and that goes for thoughts, and that goes for feelings, it goes for the whole kit and caboodle, really.
Well, that seems like a fantastic note to finish it on for this time.
Great.
So I hope people have enjoyed the sounds of our voices.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much, John. So
pleasure.
See you next time.
Absolutely. Take care.
Cheers.